doing everything they talk about. You know I'm everything a boss about. Not putting work and gotta toss them out. I'm really biting, they just barking out. I'm really riding, they just parking now. His street, what to talk about. See the big H when I'm walking out. Yeah.
Another reason why I wanted to bring you on to the locker room and talk about this one particular podcast. Obviously, anyone who's followed this channel knows that there's been a heavy ELF-based coverage with base, no pun intended, with base coverage. Now, Athletes Forum Podcast is getting a little bit more diverse. All right. But one of the reasons I want to talk to you, because you are so well known and well liked and well educated on what goes on in the Viking countries. There's been talks that ELF team number 18 could be coming up north. And when I say up north, one of the favorite locations would be Copenhagen. Now, you had just mentioned, obviously, it's Sweden, totally different. Finland, totally different, about homegrowns not wanting to play anywhere else. And we've seen, obviously, the experiment go throughout Europe, obviously, with everything's going on now with Barcelona. We don't got to dive too much into it. But the team, the league wants to expand and get to 24 is the magic number. Will it get there? I don't know. But there's been talks that team number 18 could be heading up north to Denmark, Copenhagen. First initial thoughts would be what?
That's a good idea. I think that makes more sense out of all the Nordic countries because it's so close to Germany, northern Germany. You could put a team in that division. I think it's the Central Division at ELF. I'm not 100% sure. That has those teams that are in like the northern part of Germany. And that way the travel costs.
Central or Western?
I don't know. One of those. But I know like what I'm saying is Denmark, Copenhagen is much closer to Hamburg, Berlin, Dusseldorf out there, I think, is in that same general vicinity. Yeah. I'm not good with it. Hey, my education is from the United States, so geographically all I know is Texas. But again, a team from Denmark would have much easier transportation to those locations than anywhere else in the Nordic countries. Because Denmark is the most southern. It's the most closest to Germany. And in my opinion, the few times I've been to Denmark, I was like, hey, like Germany 2.0, because this weather good out here. Like, they get good weather out there. That's what's crazy.
You get good weather for sure.
They get good weather compared to Norway and Finland, where it's even like Iceland, like we're much more north. So you would have a team that one has better weather, which means they can play into the October time that you have in ELF going to the playoffs, right?
Yeah, September-ish, yeah.
Yeah, September, October-ish time. So you got a team that could play into that at home and away. And then you also have a team that the traveling costs would be similar. It's not a long trip for most of those games. Obviously, going other places, it will be, but it'd be more similar to a team like a Berlin traveling. And again, going from Copenhagen, it's a major hub. So there's going to be, to major cities, you're going to have a pretty good direct flight. From that aspect, my initial thoughts is great idea. But when I think like from the football aspect,
let's get real.
Yeah, like what the hell? Like why have you do? Like I don't even understand what the point is. Like it don't make no sense to me from the football.
Well,
aspect.
They want the league to represent Europe, obviously. So like you see, they tried to divvy into like the east side, but the experiment hasn't been great thus far. A lot of the good competition is central. It's Germany. Paris making a statement now. Teams like Milan and Helvetic are trying to show that they could compete. But what does it look like up north?
I honestly, like, if I've said this before, I probably haven't said it on anybody's podcast or anything, but if they put a team in Denmark, it has to be supplemented by Sweden and Finland. And it has to be the situation where Sweden and Finnish players count as domestics, which makes the team Nordic. And from that aspect,
homegrown.
Yeah, and for that, you would maybe be able to get good players from those regions to play on that team. But again, like I said about Sweden and players wanting to play on their team, you'd have to get permission or at least some type of agreement with most of those federations. Because one situation, and again, I only talk about what I really know about. In Finland, a lot of teams don't play internationally because most international competitions won't make room for the Maple League season. So teams just really don't. If you've ever looked and seen Finnish teams play internationally, they play before the season starts. The NEFL, the CFL, they've always done it like before the season. A few times they've done it in the middle of the season to play like Swedish teams or a Danish team here and there. But normally it just doesn't mesh well because the Maple League is so well established already. So it doesn't make sense for them. But if you go over to Sweden, like the Super Series, this last year, Stockholm played in the CEFL. And their schedule in the Super Series was adjusted so that they could play in that during their bye weeks. So they've shown that they're willing to make those type of concessions for teams. And they've done that for multiple years for the Stockholm Mean Machine, for the Karlstad Crusaders, and for Tyresö, and Örebro Black Knights as well. They've played the Scandinavian Cup, the CEFL, the NEFL, and the Federation in Sweden has allowed them to adjust their regular season schedule. So they can do both. So you would probably be able to get a good amount of Swedish players to play on that team. Now, the issue still comes that the Danish players, I think you would probably get them to not care about the local league. Like they're not worried about fitting it around the schedule. They would just pool the players because it's just much better football. But even though you're going to get probably the best Danish players, I don't think that's going to give you a competitive team in the ELF. I think even with a couple of Swedish players, you're still looking, and financially, I think they can figure out the import situation. I think you're getting a team that can compete, but not compete well enough that you have like a huge following or that people buy into the home team. Because again, you're basically borrowing players from Sweden, and those Swedish players are probably going to be your best players, which aren't going to be supported by people from Denmark. And then the Swedish league is still going to have its own league. And those players are still going to play on their own local teams. So competition, you might get a decent team that can win 3 or 4 games a year, but you're never going to get enough talent that people buy into that club as an ELF franchise.
And it's also hard because you mentioned they will have to kind of let other countries count as homegrown. Then you kind of open up Pandora's box, right? And it's not like, well, if I'm Helvetic, can I dive into Italy or Austria, or being that they're so close? But I guess if you have one team up north, it's something to consider.
I would say only because of the Nordic situation. That's the only reason I think that you could do that and no one would really be upset, because you have to look at places like, Finland, we only have 6 million people. Like the population is just really
probably got 6 million
small.
people in your town in Texas.
We got 2 million in Houston where I'm from. So like that's Helsinki here, which is the biggest city. So it's just one of those situations where the Nordic doesn't have that many players to choose from in the first place compared to a lot of places. I know Switzerland is probably the biggest comparison in Europe of a small location, but Switzerland does have a high population. It's a small area, high population. Most of the Nordics, not that situation. Population is small. Yeah, it's very spread out, and the population just isn't as dense. So you're going to have less people to draw from. So I think that if you do it in Denmark, you're not going to really get a lot of people from Finland that are going to play on that team. Like it doesn't make sense traveling wise for them. And again, with the Maple League being as set as it is and organized, it really doesn't. But you'll get a couple really good Swedish players that'll come over. You already have Swedish players in the ELF playing every year because they'd rather play there than in Sweden. So you get some of those good players, and that would boost the competition. And I think you could get a decent team that can win 2 or 3 games a year.
A decent team that can win 2 or 3.
I mean, you'll have a team that the team from Milan and the team from Switzerland will be upset at. That's all games in those 2 franchises.
Yeah.
But it'll be multiple nationalities, and those 2 franchises will be very upset about that. But the rest of the league, it won't be a big enough like, oh, well, they're just beating everybody because they got no. They're going to win a couple of games that you just didn't think they were going to win.
Yeah.
And that'll still make the league, the parity in the league good. But again, for me, I don't know what the end goal would be. Like, who wants to build a franchise to be average?
That's
just to be in the league. But if that's what you want, obviously, if that's what they want, I think that's possible. Me personally, I'm not here for that. Like, I'm not here for it.
We ain't here for the wasting time of it.
But honestly, like just from my personal experience of how Europeans go about their business with this football thing, just being in the league is the goal for a lot of people. I've talked to a lot of players and say, hey, do you want to play, football on the stage? You want to be professional? What do you want to do? And they're like, I'd like to be in the ELF. I'm like, be in the ELF? You're from Europe.
Yeah.
And they're like, yeah, but I like to get in the league.
And it's
like,
crazy.
You want to be like an all-star? No, I just want to be in the league.
And that's such a cultural thing too. Like that's like being a sophomore in high school and or a freshman in high school and you just want to be on varsity. To say you want to be on varsity. I want more like, obviously again culture thing, but people that are dogs and want to play, want to win, and want to compete and want to play at the highest level. And I mean, again, it's partly how like we're trained and grown up and taught how to compete. And a lot of these kids like Jordan Poole, wide receiver for the Vikings, Italian from Milan, he didn't start playing till he was 20, and that's normal over here. That's normal in Europe. So. And by the way, those who don't know, again, I put the article up, the team that they're thinking about or the area that they're thinking about capturing in the ELF. And these are all rumors. There's an article and you could go read it or translate it. But the location that they're thinking about is Copenhagen. So we'll see how, this all pans out, so to say. But I guess my final question, would be is you said, if they want to put together a competitive season, win 2 or 3 games, like even if you bring in all those other countries and the league allows those to be homegrown talent, and you still could go out and get talent, so to say. We've seen the Stockholm Mean Machine and the Copenhagen Towers compete recently in the CEFL. Stockholm put up a fight against the Flash. Shout out to my Broncos beating the Towers. But think about those teams combined with greater talent. Can we put together a team that is better than 2 or 3 games with Northern talent? Like there's talent. There's talent. I see it in the league.
Let me retract my statement and get it back to 3 or 4 games. Like I feel like I feel like
where's the disparity though? Like where are they not competing at? Is it up front? Because that's the question. Up front, is it the skill position?
I think they're gonna be able to compete internationally. Like again, you're going to have a team that's going to be able to probably beat one of the Spanish teams, probably can beat Barcelona at some point because they don't always get the best players, and we know that situation is bad. You're going to get a team that can probably at some point beat that Helvetic Guards. They might be able to beat the Milano Seamen. So that's 3 wins right there. And then when you start thinking like, okay, what can we do? They might be able to put a Poland team on their ass. That might happen. I'm not going to say for sure. So maybe we're like 4 wins now. After that, the rest of those games, it really depends on what kind of like imports and players they bring in. I can't forecast that. But I'm telling you, if they baseline were even import-wise with those other 4 teams, they could compete with their domestics. Their domestics will compete with other domestics.
Yeah.
But once you take them into Berlin, Dusseldorf, Hamburg, Vienna, once you get into those areas, I can't tell you that they're going to be able to match up pound for pound in every position because they might not, just because those teams usually have a little bit more going for them. And it's more about a numbers thing than a per player. Like if you got the best of the best in the Nordics and put them on a team, you got a team that's going to be mid to top team in the division. But we both know that's not going to happen. So what you get compared to what you want to get, I can't forecast that. But I think that it's one of those situations where I say this with true meaning, and if anybody from Denmark, Norway, or Sweden feels some way about this, that's cool. If you get the Finnish players to join, you have a much better chance of actually competing in the ELF.
We've seen their impact in the league. We've seen Finland impact in the league. There's an ELF champion MVP playing for Vienna that's from Finland.
The whole Finnish coalition is out there in Vienna, right? They had a receiver, a running back, a DB. Yeah. I mean, they've shown that top end talent in Finland is pretty high, and top end talent in Sweden is also very high. But again, if they put a team in Denmark, you probably not getting any Finnish players. Yeah. If you put a team in Sweden, you probably get some Finnish players to join that team. And it's just a situation about location, time, effort, how easy it is for them to make it work and stuff like that.